continued to grow. And we found that the one thing about hot weather is it's fantastic for pizza sales, because you'll never ever meet a woman who can't wait to go home on a 40-degree day to cook a 3-course meal. She's like, get the beer out of the fridge, you bastard, and I'm ordering pizza. So about 6 months or 12 months after we opened the Rockhampton store, the franchisee rang me in a frantic, absolute panic, and he said, we're in trouble and we're probably going to go broke. And I said, why? I mean, things are so good. And he said, Pizza Hut's about to start delivering. And he had never really worked out how he was going to compete with Pizza Hut. I mean, they weren't delivering in those days. So I flew to Rockhampton, and on the way up I picked up a few books and read a few things, and I came across this book called Guerrilla Marketing and Guerrilla Warfare. How to attack your competitors from the flanks. How to be the smaller player and take the big guy out by knowing where to hit him in the knees. So we decided that we were going to be guerrilla marketers, and we were going to compete not head to head with Pizza Hut but from the flanks. And we dressed up a little fellow, 16-year-old kid, in an eagle costume and stood him at the front of the shop holding out the banner every night to people on their way home. And there were simple messages, retail messages, fun messages. People were driving home, honking the horn, dogs were barking, kids were screaming, people were having accidents. I mean, this was a fantastic advertising campaign. Quite often, a 16-year-old kid, stinking hot day in Rockhampton, in his big heavy costume, he'd pass out right there in front of the shop in the gutter. And as the people were driving home, they'd see the eagle and they'd pull in because they were really worried about him. And they'd come in and say, the eagle's passed out and they don't have to front. We'd take the order and he'd be right. We'd go pick him up and take him and put him in the cool room and he'd be fine. So after a few months, the franchisee was getting such amazing results out of guerrilla marketing. He became a fellow who was obsessed with doing his marketing differently. And he rang me, well, he didn't ring me. This is how it went. I get a phone call. This was not the first phone call, but one of many over the next few years, from the CEO of Pizza Hut. And he's got a deep Texan accent, and he started screaming down the phone and saying that there'd been an incident in Rockhampton and that we weren't playing by the rules. And I said, give me a number, I'll call you back. So I rang the franchisee and I said, how's everything going up there? And he said, mate, it's fantastic. I said, have we had any problems? None at all. How's business? Unbelievable. I said, had any incidences up there at all? He said, incidences? I said, yeah. I said, I just had a phone call from the CEO of Pizza Hut. There's this dead silence at the other end, and he said, oh yeah, there was one. I said, oh, what happened, mate? He said, I was dressed up in the Eagle the other night and handed out menus in the Pizza Hut car park. A couple of the managers didn't like it, came out and slapped me around a bit, so that's okay. I got into them. So here's these two Pizza Hut managers and the Eagle fighting in the car park. So he goes to the newspaper the next day and says, right, those bastards beat me up in the newspaper. Didn't know that he was in their car park. So here's a photo of him on the front page of the paper, and it's got headlines, Pizza Wars. And of course his sales continued to grow and the business was terrific. From there, we continued to grow right around country New South Wales, country Queensland. I moved the offices from country New South Wales up here to Brisbane, and we started moving into the market in Brisbane. And from there it became very competitive. It was a very interesting period because the business had become so successful, I'd almost go as far as saying that we were 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And we really thought that we could do whatever we wanted, but we were up against two of the major American-backed franchise pizza businesses who weren't really going to let us get established in Brisbane without a fight. And before I knew it, we had a massive price war going on. So I think that our standard pizzas in those days were selling at maybe $12, and before we knew it, they went from $11 to $10 to $9 to $8, and all of a sudden, you're selling the same product for almost half the price. And it's a really interesting case study. If you ever have the opportunity and you're sitting down with a bunch of friends and you want to really do your own heads in, work out that whatever product you're selling, and you've got your model all set up, you know what your wages are, you know what your overheads are, you know what your advertising budget is, that's fine, that's all good. All I want you to do is halve the price of the product you're selling, right? And see if you're going to be able to survive through that. So here we are with like 50 or 60 franchisees, everybody loves the brand, everybody loves the product, but the price has dropped so much it's very difficult to try and justify how we're going to trade our way into a business that's going to be as profitable as it was before. Anyway, I called in a friend of mine, and it was probably one of the most interesting periods in my life, because as the franchisees were struggling and the business was growing, and I was trying to stay on top of everything, including the fact that I bought out my mum about a year before, and I paid a lot of money, did it properly, had the company valued, had a ton of debt. Well, the bank called me in and they gave me 14 days to sort out my debt to equity. So I was basically going broke, and I was on the verge of losing it all. It was 1993. And I got a phone call from this guy. He rang me on the Friday afternoon. He was really happy. And he explained to me that he was from the Australian Financial Review, and he congratulated me on being nominated as Australian Young Business Person of the Year. And he was so happy about telling me this. And then he said, I want you to come to Sydney on Friday for the awards. I'm sitting there thinking I'll probably be broke by Friday, but I'll go down anyway. And I went down and I won the award. And it was a great situation, because from winning that award they sent me off to Harvard Business School for the next 3 years to learn business, which was the crossroad in my life. But getting back to the situation with these price wars, I called on a friend of mine who's a marketing guy. He's actually a professor over at QUT, a fellow by the name of Bill Proud, and I said, what do we do? Bill said, what you do in these situations is you get right out to the front line. You go right out and see what's going on. And we went out to the stores on the Friday night, and what was interesting was we were very busy. We had a lot of people coming and going in the business, but we also had a situation where they weren't spending the money that they used to. Bill said to me, I want you to look closer at the problem in your shop. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, look around at your customers. And what we saw was the standard customers for our company in those days was young families. And they were sort of standing over there. And then there was these other people coming in, and they had fistfuls of coupons, and they had screaming snotty-nosed kids under each arm, and they had the arse out of their pants. And basically Bill said to me, your shop's full of ferals. He said, you've got a bunch of customers in here you don't want. They're unprofitable customers. I said, what do you mean unprofitable customers? To digress, I'm standing there at the counter that night, and a guy walks in, and I go to serve him, and he's got one thong on. And you know, you always have a light conversation with the customer. You know, and the first thing I did was I looked down and I said, oh, g'day mate, did you lose a thong? Straight face, he goes, no, found one. And Bill says to me at the time, we've got to go back and we've got to find a way to get rid of unprofitable customers. So we went back and we repositioned the brand. We realised that we couldn't be all things to all people. We were in a situation where we were trying to keep all the customers happy. We went back and said, there is no problem at all offending certain people that we don't want, because we want a customer that's more loyal, the one that's been following our brand for many years, and the one that we know we can keep, instead of trying to do the whole thing. And that was what we did. We got all the franchisees together. And imagine this, and I said to them, guess what guys, we've worked out how to go forward, and the first thing we've got to do is lose customers. And that's exactly what we did. We dropped customers by about 7 or 8% over the next 6 months. We picked them all back up again, and we got focused on who the customers were that mattered. I'll just digress on one point. There was many advertising campaigns that we ran over the years, particularly in New Zealand. And one of the things that I found the most fascinating was you can do a ton of research and you can find out a bunch of things from customers. But the most important thing you can find out is that if the customer tells you they want 10 things, only 2 will actually matter. Classic example is if you go to a woman and you say to her, look, what are you looking for in a good husband? Let's say this woman's already married. She says, well, I want him to be a good lover, and I want him to, be a good father and a good provider. I want him to stop adjusting himself in public. Stuff like that. And if you finally said to her, well, what are the 2 most important things that matter? Most women will say, you know what, as long as he does this and this, I'll put up with all these other filthy habits.